a special day in the life of the church. Christ the King Sunday. Well, what does it mean to celebrate the reign of Christ? How do we do that in a world that is broken by violence and hatred and political corruption? How do we celebrate Christ the King in the midst of broken friendships, broken relationships, broken promises? And let's say that life were just a breeze. What does it mean to celebrate Christ the King, the reign of Christ? So today's celebration, it provides us a space to look really closely at our relationship with Christ. After all, today, being the last Sunday of the year, is kind of the equivalent of New Year's Eve. Okay? And if you're like me, towards the end of December, and especially on New Year's Eve, you're kind of thinking about the year that's passed. You're thinking about where you are and where you're going to go, or how you're going to go about living in the new year. Well, that's part of what today's celebration is about. It's time to reflect on the reign of Christ. And I'd like us to do that by thinking about and pondering 3 different points: rule, power, and devotion. Rule, the rule of life. What do we use to orient our life? What guides your decision making? What guides my decision making? What guides our daily actions? What holds ultimate sway in our lives? Who or what has first place in your hearts? In very poetic language, St. Paul's letter emphasizes that Jesus Christ is to have first place in all creation, which includes my heart and your heart and our heart as a congregation. First place in all things. And as one commentator insightfully says, what edges Christ out of first place in our hearts? And this same commentator says, all congregational conflicts and power plays and struggles could be wonderfully managed if we asked, does this put Christ in first place in the life of this congregation? From budgets to ministry to interactions with each other in the hallways, we can ask ourselves, do our actions align with putting Christ first? Now, of course, we have vows. We have vows to spouses. We have commitments to family and friends and colleagues. And those commitments are very important. And all of our commitments, all of our relationships as followers of Jesus are centered in Jesus, are centered in putting Christ first and in nurturing friendships and relationships that help us do that, and through which we help others to honor the Holy One in their lives. So a very basic spiritual practice is, in the course of a day or an evening, to ask yourself, do my behaviors align with Christ having first place in my heart? And if they do, great. And if they don't, well, then we can ask for mercy, and we can ask for grace, to do it better the next day or in the next hour. To put Christ first in all things. Okay, power. This celebration of Christ the King shows us what the power of God looks like. Now, the power of God in Jesus crucified and risen is head-spinning when I really think about it. And I don't know about you, but I can readily affirm God's power in Jesus risen and resurrected from the dead. Jesus crucified. How do we see God's power in Jesus crucified? Maybe one way of seeing the power of God in Jesus crucified is seeing that even in the face of murderous torture, even in the face of dehumanizing ridicule, Jesus chooses mercy. Jesus chooses to respond to the toxic power taunts and bullying of others by praying. Jesus is showing us what it looks like to the final moments of his life to choose mercy. And hey, do you hear Jesus on the cross being taunted and how he responds? And all the taunts run parallel to the temptations that Jesus faced in the wilderness. Well, if you're the Christ, turn these stones into bread. Oh, if you're the Christ, get off that cross. Save yourself. Save us. So from the beginning of Jesus' ministry to the very end of Jesus' ministry, he's dealing with power. He's dealing with choices about how he is going to use his power. And he always chooses to use it for mercy. How do y'all use your power? How do I use mine? As a congregation. Just not as individuals, but as a congregation, y'all have power. How do you use it? As followers of Jesus, it's to be used in the power of mercy. It's to be used to reveal something of God's kingdom. Ask yourself each day, how have I been using my power today? Has it been in the service of the reign of Christ, of hastening the reign of Christ in this world? Ask yourself, did I dig deep into my soul? Especially with the people who pluck my very last nerves, right? Did I remember that kindness is possible even when fondness is not? How did I use my power today? That's another spiritual practice. Okay, devotion. You look in the dictionary, and devotion is defined more or less by saying it involves an intentional, purposeful giving of ourselves in the cause of something. Okay. Well, as followers of Jesus, what we give ourselves to intentionally and purposefully is doing everything we can do in the course of our daily lives to make God's love present in our world. You know? Maybe it's saying hey to to one of the kids who's like not so popular at school or who gets pushed up against the locker, you know? Maybe it's extending yourself to a colleague who can be a real pain in the back. And you say, hey, how's it going? Maybe it's knowing that there's someone that it's hard for you to really feel any kind of warmth towards. And so what you do is you ask God to send God's warmth to that person. That's how we can make God's love present in the world. Now, devotion requires, if you will, a portfolio of spiritual practices that enable us to form our lives according to the imperative of the prophet Micah. To love mercy, to seek justice, to walk humbly with one another and with God. That's what it boils down to. That's not just a nice bumper sticker. You know, that's just not just a nice inspirational poster, right? That quote from the prophet Micah is what Jesus also forms his life around. And that's what we're called to form our lives around. To love mercy, to seek justice, and to walk humbly and kindly with one another and with God. So I hope you're getting a sense of what it means then to celebrate Christ the King, to celebrate the reign of Christ. And as we come to the end of this new year, to realize that we are called. Actually, we're compelled. We are compelled by our baptisms. We are compelled by daring to receive Holy Eucharist, to hasten the reign of Christ in our world. That's what it's about. We receive the body of Christ to bring the body of Christ into the world and to hasten Christ's rule in our hearts and in the world. And remember what Jesus said. He declared, "The reign of God is within you." And so you and I are called to bring that forth. The reign of God is within you.